And thanks, Mike, for organizing this session. And this is just fun and casual talk, but as, you know, today we're going to have some people talking about performance, and it's going to be fun and entertaining and informative. So, Mike,
We're ready to get started here.
well, just an intro or whatever you want to say.
Absolutely. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here. This is actually really cool, and it's our thing that we're going to do while this stupid pandemic's going on, so we can be a little bit closer, learn some stuff, and hopefully be out on the road soon with our cars. Just a little quick introduction to the panelists. Here's me, Mike Martin. We have John is our V8 guy. Him and Brian Cooper have been working on his V8 Sky for a little while now. It's gonna be amazing. Can't wait to see that thing once it's Troy Lyman out in California, sunny. Well, I'm assuming sunny California.
Oh yes, very sunny.
Very well known on the forums. And one thing about Troy, I got to say, I mean, you have a gift of answering technical questions in very simple terms that probably my wife could even understand it. So I think kudos to that.
Thank you.
I agree.
And we have Salvador. He's our newest U.S. citizen, I guess we could say.
Yes.
Congratulations on that, man. Up in, I don't know if it's sunny in Minnesota or not. Probably not. Probably snowy. So
Pretty sunny, actually. Yeah.
and we got 40 right here. Actually, there he is. And he is our resident naval guy in the Navy, which is cool, and he's very well known for the Kappa community as well. And congratulations on that. When does Kayla do, by the way?
So Kayla is due by the end of May is what it's looking at. So we are in the very last month, only a few weeks away. So,
well, that's pretty exciting. Having 2 kids myself, trust me, you're going to be pretty busy.
yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah,
He also has a really badass V8 Sky. So
I know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then our main panelist we have here today is Martin Scott from RPM Motorsports. Really happy to have him here and help us out with all of our performance questions and everything that he can answer there. Obviously, RPM Motorsports has kits that you can put as far as turbos and upgrades for your tunes and everything else. And before we get started, I want to say something real quick about Martin. When I bought the Stage 2 tune for my 2.4 a couple of years ago, I got it with the new injectors and the high flow cat. Well, that was at the time I didn't know as much as I do now. So I was having a friend of mine about 200 miles away help me with it. So I drove there on, I think it was a late Friday night. We were going to work on it Saturday, get it done Saturday, and I was going to come home. And it happened to be Easter weekend. So needless to say, things got delayed, and I actually was working on it Easter day. And once you change injectors, just to let everybody know, once you change injectors, you really can't start it or go anywhere unless it's retuned. So I'm thinking, oh, great, I'm going to be stuck on Easter Sunday at this at my friend's house, and this is going to be terrible. I can't leave until Monday for Martin. So I happened to give him a call, and believe it or not, he was available, and he tuned my car on Easter Sunday a couple of years ago so I could make it back. And the takeaway to that story is not that you can call Martin up on Christmas and he's going to help you. I mean, that happened Sunday. But just to show
I've actually tuned cars on Christmas, so
okay. Well, I didn't want to put that out.
I can believe it.
that is not the norm. That is not the norm today.
Well, that's why I want to give you a little disclaimer that you're not going to be doing it on purpose on Christmas. But anyway,
Merry Christmas and pass the math table.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
But the point is, actually, Martin's a fantastic guy. What I really like is he's on the Facebook groups a lot, answering questions. He's not hiding or anything like that, or ignoring anybody out there. As soon as a question comes out about performance or what to do, I mean, he's right there answering, and that's really cool. And that's why we wanted to have him here today, to kind of help us out as well with questions live. And for those of you, I mean, I don't have it on my computer, but you can actually, there's a chat you can open up if you want to answer questions, because we're going to pretty much have most of you on mute, so we don't have a bunch of conversations going on. So if you have questions, just type them in the little chat session. We're going to be kind of looking at them, and we'll bring them up as we're going. So,
yeah, just like last time, I'll be monitoring the chat, and I'll forward the questions to the person that is being asked to.
Perfect.
So So anyway, so just kind of get this started. Martin, I know you just released the new power steering reservoir thing, which looks really cool. How's that going for you?
Good. We sold over a dozen in the first week, and we've kind of got that next wave that's in production right now. It's really cool to see the different colors come out of the powder coating oven. So, I mean, people are ordering everything, every color of these cars. Plus, we've done some custom colors already. It's one of the nice things. We're trying to be as vertically integrated as we can here at RPM. So we used to outsource all of our powder coating, and the turnaround time was insane. It started out as a week, and then it was 10 days, and all the powder coating shops are just backed up. And so I said, we need to be able to turn this stuff around in like a day. And so we literally fabricated our own 15,000 watt powder coating oven. It's in the back of the shop, and now we are able to basically take an order on Monday and coat it, get it in the oven, and literally when it comes out of the oven and it's cool to the touch, it can go in a box and out the door.
That is nice.
Very cool.
And we've been having a lot of fun with the powder coating. I don't know how to do it. My team has definitely become the experts, but they're powder coating everything. I mean, control arms and their powder coat. I mean, we've got this 280Z project up here right now where we dropped a small block Chevy in it. We're getting ready to start the headers and the exhaust on it this week. And they've done a bunch of powder coating on the tie rods and the control arms, and they're just really kind of making it extra special for that customer.
So basically, if somebody's sleeping on the job, you'll just grab them and powder coat them. Just.
They're gonna go in the oven. That's right.
No, with that power steering reservoir thing, I know whenever I did my turbo thing, I had to move my power steering over top of the battery. Is that movable as well? Is it going to fit whatever the standard is?
It does. In fact, give me 1 second, and I'm going to give you a side by side. So give me 30 seconds.
Okay.
Anybody counting the seconds?
I don't know if anybody can hear my dog barking in the background.
Hey, LT, where's the lid to this? The top?
I put Martin on the spot. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Just to give everyone, here's a stalker, and then here's our new one.
So how's the lid go on the new one?
It's actually a screw, and I'm getting the lid right now.
Oh, okay.
But these do hold physically more than the stock ones do, but they're pretty darn solid. Thank you. So
I am spotlighting your screen so that people can see it.
That is nice.
So this is an emerald green one, but there's a stock one. So you can kind of see here, they really are about the same size. And we designed them that way because we want to be, these are no longer available from GM. GM ran out about August of last year. For those of you that don't know, the way the GM works is, and they're only required to make parts for a car for 10 years. And that's more of an insurance company agreement kind of thing. You get into an accident, you have to be able to get parts for your car. And after 10 years, if there's no demand for the parts, GM is allowed to basically phase that part out. And before it gets phased out, there are dealerships around the country that will have these parts. And when the number gets to a certain level, those parts get recalled and they go to something called the vintage warehouse. And then that's where they get a final inventory of the parts that are on hand. And if a dealership needs one of those parts, it has to ship directly from the vintage warehouse to the dealership. So these were no longer available as of about August of last year. And so we knew that we needed to have that aftermarket capability, that aftermarket option. So we developed this.
Very
You know,
nice.
Very
I
cool.
just want to say real quick, Martin, thank you for doing that. A lot of people don't understand how much these vendors can help us keep these cars on the road by doing things like that. I mean, I wasn't even aware those things were gone. So there's one more option for us, and that's really important. Thank you, Martin.
No worries, absolutely. And as as these parts become, they're getting phased out, we're going to do our best because we don't plan on going anywhere. We're going to be here for the next 10 years. Or at least until somebody wants to write me a check for RPM. No, I'm just kidding. But in any case, we're not going anywhere. And I'm not going to refer to the Kappa platform I'm not going to refer to it in the same sentence as the Fiero, but I'm going to. Fiero was another kind of a good example of, this happened a lot of years ago. GM only produced it for a few short years. Parts dried up for it, and there's only about 2 vendors in the world now that are still building parts for the Fieros, and it's because one of them happens to be here in Arizona, and I know Andy personally, and he is very passionate about that platform, and that's what it takes to stay engaged with a single platform for a long period of time. And I will tell you that there's one thing that we have here at RPM is a lot of passion for the Kappa platform, clearly. So
Cool. We have a question from Tom Brown. He says, my friend has a PO141 code on his GXP and with the CEL cannot pass emissions. He has replaced the O2 sensor twice. Can this be tuned out or shut it off?
So the answer is yes. Can everyone still hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. My screen went blank. I apologize. So here's the thing with tuning and shutting off codes. Some codes you can shut off very simply. They don't affect anything that has to do with the emissions control systems. There are other codes that if you shut them off, certain readiness monitors will not go ready. They'll just never go ready. So for instance, we all know the notorious P0420 code. That code, if you shut that code off, the car will go into readiness mode on, I believe, all 3 out of 4 of the emissions systems, but it will not have all 4 ready. So in some states, they allow you to have one readiness monitor not ready. So check with your local emissions testing facility and ask them, just call them up, flat out ask them. I've got a vehicle that's got 3 of my 4 emissions readiness monitors that are ready to go. One of them, for whatever reason, I can't get it to go ready. And they'll either tell you that, no, you have to have all 4 ready, or here in Arizona, they allow us to have one that is not ready in readiness mode. So these cars still pass, even though we shut the 420 code down. I guess in regard to the 141 code, it really kind of comes down to, we like to get to the root of the problem. The 420 code, we know what that's about. And using an O2 extender, in most cases, 9.5 out of 10. I mean, there's one car out of 20 that for whatever reason, no matter what we do, we just can't get the check engine light to stay off using an extender. But in most cases, an extender will keep that off. But that's diving in and diagnosing the actual problem itself. Is let's find out what's causing the code. I actually I should know that code, but I'm gonna look it up real fast. Heater code. Oh, it's the heater circuit? Yeah. There's an exhaust fuse. And you need an O2 sensor. So Dion, who is my lead tech here at RPM, he has said that it's a heater control circuit. So it could be a blown fuse. That would be the easy fix. And it could also just simply be a failing O2 sensor. I do recommend quite often now to replace O2 sensors, because the fact of the matter is these cars are 12, 13 years old, and a lot of them still have the original O2 sensors, and you'd be shocked in how the difference, you replace the upstream and downstream sensor, suddenly your idle smooths out, your fuel economy gets better. So these are things that just because the car is running, it might not be running as well as it could be. And by changing these parts out that make a difference, like O2 upper and lower O2 sensors, your car is just going to run so much better.
Yeah, the O2 sensors were replaced twice.
The O2 sensors were replaced twice. Okay. And I'm assuming that he's able to drive the car, and it probably, you can clear the code, and if you drive the car, it probably takes about 60 miles for the light to come back on. So a real quick tip on trying to determine whether a code is being thrown because of a sensor problem or because of an electrical issue is if you clear a code and it comes back immediately, like you clear it and it literally just comes right back, it's an electrical problem. That means that, something's grounding out. The sensor itself has completely failed. But if you can clear the code and the light will stay off for, let's say, 60 miles, which is about how long it kind of takes for these codes, the emission system codes to kind of appear, then, it's a sensor related problem. So I do know that if you have an O2 extender on the downstream sensors, there are other codes that can be thrown, and I do believe that the 141 code is one of those. So I guess my first question to the person who has that code is, do they have an O2 extender in place?
Yes, they do. And it is the 60 miles, like you said. It doesn't come right back.
Got it. So the extender, there are a lot of different extenders on the market, and
He's
some
tried like three.
Okay.
He's tried 3 different extenders.
So one trick that we've learned is, hey, Dion, and we'll try and demonstrate this here real quick. Do you have an O2 extender with some steel wool? Okay, Dion's gonna come up here with it, but basically I don't know why it works, but this is actually an old school hot rod guy taught me this trick. We use the L-shaped extenders. That's what we ship out, and we ship them with 2 different straight sections, and that allows you the flexibility of moving that O2 sensor, in various locations outside the exhaust track. You have to remember, you're going to throw the 420 code, because basically what's happening is there's a temperature difference between the upstream and the downstream O2 sensor. So if you have a catalytic converter in place and it's working properly, your exhaust gases may be at 1600 degrees on the upper sensor, and they're going to drop to 1200 degrees on the lower sensor. Well, if you run a catless pipe or a high flow cat, you're at 1600 degrees on the upstream sensor, but you are, 1550 at the downstream. So there isn't enough of a temperature delta there to actually, then the car thinks that there's something wrong. It thinks that the catalytic converter may have failed or something along those lines. So by basically taking the downstream sensor and removing it from the exhaust track, it is not getting the full heat of the exhaust, and it is basically, you're tricking the car into thinking that there's a cat in there. So that's the purpose behind those. But again, you get it too far out of the track, and you might keep the 420 code off, but now you're popping codes like 141 codes.
But Tom, does he have a catless thing or a high flow cat?
Yeah,
or
high flow cat?
Yeah. We've switched to the 400 cell count MagnaFlows, and they still flow well enough that there's just not enough of a temperature difference. Typically with the high flow cats though, you only need to use one straight O2 section. You don't really have to use the full L. Catless pipes, you're going to wind up using the full L, at least with our kits, because the catless pipes do actually cool the exhaust gases down enough. While he's looking for that, I'll just explain this. Basically, if you just take the straight section, like a straight section, and remove it, put some steel wool. You don't have to pack it in there, but just put some steel wool in there and then rethread it back into your system. So you're basically putting some steel wool between the exhaust gases and the tip of the O2 sensor. that actually works really well. We've been doing that here in the shop for about a year now, and it's been working really well.
Okay, so the straight piece and the steel wool. I'll let him know that.
So I would also see if the straight piece is too far away, like Martin's saying, it might be too far away and it's not getting hot enough, or there's too much of a difference.
Yeah, it is, because the when they're too far away, you get a like a delayed response code or slow response code, because it's just too far away. So you got to find that right balance. It's kind of a tricky thing, and it's different with every car in every state, and a lot of that is just because here in Arizona during the dead of the summer, our asphalt's 168 degrees, and it in somewhere in a cooler part of the country, let's say, in the winter time on the East Coast, it might be 15 degrees out. So all of the outside temperatures affect the way that O2 sensor is going to read a temperature.
Now, here's a question. He replaced the sensor with a Bosch sensor. Does AC Delco or Bosch make a difference?
It does, 100%.
Does it really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is true for both O2 sensors, upstream, downstream, both the 2.4s and the 2.0s. It's also MAF, the MAF sensors on your intake. AC Delco, nothing but AC Delco. Bosch makes a comparable product in every regard, whether it's a MAF sensor or a O2 sensor, but if it's a Delco that came in the car, that's what needs to go back in it. And I don't know the rhyme or reason to this. It's kind of like the age-old argument of spark plugs. Any of you who've known me or if I've tuned your car, I always say we have to have AC Delco 41-108s in the car, and they say, well, I have the comparable NGK, and NGK builds the spark plug for AC Delco. I don't care. For whatever reason, that NGK is most likely going to cause knock. It might be the same plug to some extent, but there's some sort of a difference. And I can say this without a doubt because of, last year I tuned almost 600 LNF or LE5 cars. And it makes a difference. I had a car yesterday. I tuned 5 cars yesterday, 4 Kappas and an ATS. And one of the Kappas had a full stage 3 build, and he had knock when he shouldn't have had knock at this point. I haven't even given him the full load yet, and he had knock. And I asked him about the spark plugs, and he said he had just put them in. He just put the spark plugs in there, brand new. I said, well, what did you put in there? He said, well, I went to the auto parts store, and they said these NGKs, and they said they were like the best plug, and they were $12.99 each. And I said, well, do me a favor. Go back to the auto parts store, spend $6.99 for a set of Delco 41-108s, put them in the car, call me back. Calls me back 45 minutes later, and he said, you're right. I just left the auto parts store. I changed them out in the parking lot. I did a wide open throttle pull. The car did not break up, and we did a data log. All the knock was gone. So I would tell him, swap that sensor out for a Delco and see if that takes care of his problem. If that's not it, if that doesn't work, shorten the length of the O2 extender and put some steel wool in there and see if that works.
Cool. So this is a good segue to start the performance section of the show or the session today. I think we can divide it in LE5 engines and LNF engines. And we can start with bolt-on mods and what the relationship is with the tunes and the relearn feature in these cars. So,
okay. I will say that the relearn or the learn down on these cars is it's a misconception. Basically, it's not that the car is dumbing itself down. It's just that it was right around 2006 when GM started to do this with their vehicles. They basically wrote into the ECM programming what that car was allowed to make. And by using, the wheel hub sensors, that reports data directly back to the ECM. So the car knows how much power it's more or less making. And if it tries to make more power than it's programmed for, that's when it starts to pull pull the power back. It will not. It'll close your throttle body in some cases. It'll add false knock in some cases. So that's kind of what the learn down is. It's basically the cars are only allowed to make a certain amount of power. And when we tune these cars for the various stages, we still have kind of a level of that learn down in there, because let's just say let's say you buy our stage 2 kit at $525. So you get the charge pipes, but you don't opt for either a catless downpipe or a high flow downpipe. So we are confined at that point to your downpipe, and it's like an 800 cell count cat. So any of you who have taken a catalytic converter off of one of these cars and looked down the barrel of it, I mean, it's pretty restrictive. So it's designed to move the amount of airflow that the car was designed to make. So for instance, these cars make stock anywhere from 22 to 24 pounds per minute of airflow. And that stock cat will pass that. But on even our stage 2 cars, which we demand anywhere from 30 to 32 pounds per minute of airflow, that's when we can't, you get that back pressure between the up side of the top of the catalytic material and the back side of the turbocharger. And that raises your exhaust gas temperatures, and things become problematic from there. So on like a stage 2 car, we might neuter the tune to, let's say, 28, 29 pounds per minute of airflow. And even then, that's kind of pushing it with a stock cat. So when people say you're going to get an extra 15 horsepower out of, a high flow cat, that's kind of where that comes from, because we're able to drive more airflow through the motor. We get it in the front side of the motor, it's got to go somewhere equally as quick on the back side of the motor with as little resistance as possible.
So the point is, get a high flow cat if you're going stage 2.
Get a high flow, or if you're fortunate enough to live in a state where they don't require emissions testing, you can go catless. We do sell quite a few high flow cats to catless pipes. So real quick, there's the O2 extender. There's the there we go. And so basically you just put it in there, thread your sensor in this side into the exhaust this side, and 9 times out of 10, that's going to take care of your problem for you.
Thank you.
It's like a little insulator.
Kind of. I'm sure I could dive into it and figure out exactly why it's doing that. I mean, clearly it's muting. It's allowing the sensor to be close enough to the exhaust gases, but it's still kind of muting the temperature ranges. So.
Okay, so I think one of the questions was, if you do all the bolt-on mods, but you don't tune, then you really are not getting any gains. And does that change in the LE5 and the LNF?
Yeah, it's true for both motors. So there's, in both motors, the programming in them are written differently. Like torque management is written differently in both of the engines. So with the LE5, it's kind of just a quick, simple load versus the amount of torque that the engine is allowed to make. On the LE5s, when we're not boosting them, it's kind of like let's say our stage 2 tune, where we're giving you the injectors, and you could potentially be getting, a different cat or a cold air intake on there. We're basically maxing out that value so that it will never hit the it'll never hit the that torque number. So for instance, I think on the LE5, it says in first gear, if memory serves me correct, it's either 80 or 140 foot-pounds of torque. That's all the LE5 computer is willing to give you. So if your motor's willing to make 200, 250 foot-pounds of torque, the car's not going to give it to you. And if you have bolt-on modifications that are going to support that additional power, it's still just not going to give it to you. So that's why you have to have the performance tune. We have to go in there as tuners and basically, on the LE5, we have to max that value out so that if the car is willing to make, 200 foot-pounds of torque, it's going to put it down the drive shaft and let it go to the back tires. On the LNFs, it's a little bit different. There's still some torque management in the same regard, but there's also demanded air load tables and things of that nature that have to be adjusted in order to get additional power out of the vehicle.
Excellent. Now, Mike did a stage two tune on his 2.4, and he actually dynoed it. And Mike, do you want to talk about gains and what you found out?
Yeah, actually, before I did the tune, I had it done, and it came. If I this is going by memory, I believe it was around, and this is like, I believe this is to the wheels. This is one. This isn't just horsepower out of the engine, so it's going to be a little bit lower than what it's supposed to be. But I think to the wheels it was about 132 horsepower, and that was before. That was just stock everything. I might have had a cold air intake at the time. I don't remember. Not that that makes any difference anyway. And then after the tune, I had it done again, and it was one of these portable tune type places where they actually have it in a trailer and they go on location. So I was trying to pick, even though somebody says it doesn't matter, I was trying to pick a very similar outside temperature thing. And I think it was probably around, I don't know, 50 degrees or something outside whenever I did the first one. So I tried to pick a day when he was going to be at autocross and kind of similar time frame. I think it was like early spring. But anyway, whenever we re-dynoed it afterwards, it came up to about 164. So, I mean, just by changing injectors, the high flow cat in the tune, I mean, it did pick up 30 more horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for just changing those little things, it really is.
Yeah, and here's kind of the backstory on our kit. So we've always been involved in the racing, in the race world with these cars as early as 2006. I mean, I was probably the first guy in the world to add a wet shot nitrous kit to their LE5 Solstice. And we learned very early on that the injectors. So this is how it was explained to me from GM. The 2.4 started its life as the 2.2, and it was restroked to become a 2.4, but they left the 24-pound fuel injectors from the 2.2 into the 2.4. So what happened is now you've got more displacement. The motor's using more air load, but it's not physically able to fuel properly in the higher RPM band. So if any of you remember back in the early days, people were cracking headers left and right on their LE5s when they're like autocrossing them and taking them to the drag strip and to the road coursing tracks. And when we got involved, we had HB tuners, and so we were data logging the cars, and we had a PID set up where we could see the injector duty cycle. And let me tell you something, 0 to 100%, when the car's idling, the injector duty cycle bounces between 1% and 3%. And then when you drive it, obviously, the harder you drive it, it basically goes up to 100%. Well, it didn't take long for us to see that it was going to 100% really quickly. So the motors, the LE5s from the factory, in our opinion, and people may dispute this, but in our opinion, just from the data, the fuel injectors are not properly sized. They are too small. They're good for driving around town and maybe, taking a road trip and maybe going through the canyons. But the minute you try and, get any real performance or get into any real heavy load, spirited driving, the fuel injector is going to max out. Your car is going to run lean. Exhaust gases heat up, you crack headers, things of that. You burn up O2 sensors. So that was when we developed that was really kind of the birth of our stage 2 naturally aspirated kit for the 2.4s. And so we swapped out the injectors, retuned the cars, sent them back out on the racetrack. Now we have injector duty cycles where they were 100%. Now they are, down in like 60%, 65%. So we've never actually hit 100% duty cycle on the new injectors. So a lot of the power that you pick up with the stage 2 kit is, excuse me, I apologize. They're dropping off fixtures. Thank you. The 2.4s are now able to fuel properly. You can wind the engine out to the 6200, 6500, wherever the rev limiter is set, and it's going to have the appropriate amount of fuel to go with the air load. And that's basically, where you're making the additional power. I mean, basically a dyno is, how quickly it can roll, spin the rollers across the entire RPM band. And if you're not making any power up top, your total horsepower number is going to be obviously lower. So now that you're making power up top, your horsepower number, it comes up. So that kit's become more and more popular. It's a great alternative. Some people just don't like the idea of going full on turbo system, forced induction with their 2.4s. And so it's a good inexpensive, kind of a nice mod to get some additional power out of the 2.4, and at the same time, it really kind of makes the car safer because you're not running lean. And I think in just about every instance, because we're able to control the fuel a lot better with the new injectors, we're seeing better fuel economy. So more horsepower, better fuel economy. It's kind of a win-win all the way around.
And you can definitely feel that, even like I said, it's 30 extra horsepower. After I had it done, a friend of mine who also has a 2.4, I think he had a Solstice or whatever, I took him for a test drive, and we hit an on-ramp to the highway, and when I was hitting third gear, it was still pulling, and he could tell. He's like, holy crap, this thing is still pulling in third gear way more than it does. So it does make a difference, and they always say it's more spirited driving, and I agree 100%.
Yeah, I have the same setup in my 2.4 Solstice, and it's night and day difference for real. It just feels like the proper setup for that car.
It's the way it should have been made.
Now, Tom Brown is sharing his screen. He has that PO141. Tom, are you trying to show something here?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm the sensor. That's the downstream sensor. Is that correct?
Bank 1, obviously, and sensor 2. So it's either going to be sensor 1 or sensor 2. Sensor 2 is your downstream. So.
Okay, so try the AC Delco first, and then if that doesn't work,
try the AC Delco, and then play around with that extension length and maybe a little bit of steel wool in there. Like I said, 9.5 times out of 10, you can get it licked and get it to run without codes.
Okay. Okay, that's what we'll do then. I mean, obviously, if you fix the problem, that's the best way to go.
Absolutely, because when we start turning codes off, I mean, the codes are there for a reason. I tell people this all the time. The codes are there for a reason. We want codes to trip because that's going to give us the direction and the path that we need to take to fix the problem.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
We have 20 participants right now. This is awesome. Just wanted to thank everybody for being here. Now, do you have any more suggestions or topics for the 2.4 before we move on to the LNF?
Well, the 2.4 is a great motor. I have one in my personal race car. We just pulled it out. We're actually going to wind up de-stroking it to a 2.1 and lowering the compression on it so that we can make on E85R. We're shooting for around 500 on the motor. So it's going to be an interesting build, to say the least. You don't hear that very often, taking the 2.4 and de-stroking it to a 2.2 or a 2.1. So.
Actually, I have a question / comment if you want to talk about it. I know we're talking about the 2.4, but even if it's turboed, which I recently added, but a lot of times people talk about their boost. Somebody say, oh, I'm going to hit 23 pounds. I'm going to hit 30 pounds. I mean, they always think that the higher the boost, the better. And then with my 2.4, I'm expecting maybe 8 or 10. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's less power. And do you want to explain what those boost numbers really are?
That's a common misconception. And this is true for any forced induction vehicle. So whether it's supercharged, turbocharged, whether it's a 2.4, 2.2, 2.0, boost is a byproduct of poor airflow, plain and simple. The more you compress air, the hotter it gets. So, that all factors into the proper sizing of the turbocharger, et cetera, et cetera. But what people don't realize is you want to drive airflow, not boost. So by anytime you can make more airflow and do it with less boost, you're going to make more power and you're going to make it safer and more reliably. So on the 2.4s, you know, you look at the intercoolers on those intercoolers. Anytime you're turbocharging a vehicle, that's a huge component. You know, you want as little resistance from, you know, passenger side to driver side as possible. And a lot of times the stock intercoolers are, you know, they're built to be built as cheaply as possible, as inexpensively as possible, because everything adds to the cost of the vehicle at the end of the day. So if you've got the intercooler that comes, let's say, on the GXPs and the red lines, they are built kind of in the same fashion of a radiator, tube and fin. So they flow the air, and they flow it, and it was designed to flow that 22 to 24 pounds per minute. Anytime you try and drive more airflow, you know, you're a stage 2 car, you're getting up into the 30, 31. You're a stage 3 car, you're getting up into the 35, 36. You're a stage 4 car, you're driving, you know, up to 44 pounds per minute of airflow. That stock intercooler is going to become your bottleneck, and it's going to cause back pressure and boost. So you want to drive airflow, not boost. Boost is a byproduct of poor airflow. So,
Yeah. Now, along the same lines for amount of power in a 2.4, it's been said, and you know, there's information out there for the 2.4 forged internals, meaning the connecting rods are forged in the 2006 and early 2007 engines. There's really no way to tell which 2007 engines do have or don't unless
you
you
know,
open them up.
I'm sure there's a casting number that can be tracked down. Someone would have to do that if they really want to know. I'm sure they could track it down, saying, you know, these builds with these casting numbers had the forged internals, and the ones after this, you know, had the lesser.
So what's the reliable number for power in the 2.4 if boosted?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, it all depends on money and how much money you want to throw at the engine. If you're talking just about, you know, I've got a 2.4, it's a 2008 Pontiac Solstice, and I want to turbocharge it. In all honesty, I usually tell people don't go over, you know, 10, 11 PSI. That's a good, safe number. You know, we send 60-pound injectors out with our kit, so there's plenty of fuel there. But then you start running into other things. So, for instance, the fuel pump that comes in these cars are like something like 170 liter per hour fuel pump. So unless you're going to swap out your fuel system, you're really kind of confined to that 10, 11. Now, can you run it at 15? Sure. It's not going to last very long. But let's say you do start building the engine, you do swap over to, let's say, a return style fuel system. Now you've got the fuel to go with the airflow. So then now you're running, let's say you're running 14, 15 pounds of boost. Now you're starting to stress the internals, the rods and the pistons. You know, you swap rods, swap pistons, maybe you lower the compression ratio by a factor of, you know, 1. And now you can run on a 2.4. You can run that 20, 22 pounds of boost like you do in the LNF, and you've got the bigger displacement. So that's kind of why I personally favor the 2.4 block, because we're destroking it to a 2.1. So essentially what we're going to be left with is a motor that is, you know, big bore, short stroke, and, you know, we're going to, like I said, we're lowering the compression. We're going to run it on racing ethanol. So we're expecting some good numbers out of that engine when it's done.
That's amazing.
So if you change an intercooler only, do you have to get it retuned?
The answer is no, but because basically the car is just going to, you know, you'll notice I get this question all the time. I mean, we ship 2 intercoolers a week minimum. So there's a lot of intercoolers that are out there, and there isn't one time a week that I get an email saying, hey, I just purchased your intercooler. I put it in. I think I have a leak. Do you guys pressure test these? Well, yes, we do. We pump them up to 30 PSI, and we do a leak down test. We have a bench in the back that does that for us. I think I have a boost leak. Well, I say, well, you know, what were you making? Well, I haven't been tuned yet, but my car used to make 16 PSI, and now it's only making 14 psi. And I said, no, that's completely normal. And it's because your new intercooler is basically more efficient than the old one. It's got larger pathways that the air can pass through. So therefore, you're driving the same amount of airflow, coming in past the mass airflow sensor, but there's less boost. It's working more efficiently. That's why upgraded intercoolers, they have a compounding effect. Upgraded intercoolers are thicker, taller, larger in general. Ours is about 60% by volume larger than a stock OE intercooler, and they're built in what's called bar and plate, so not tube and fin. So the air going from the turbo side to the intake side flows so much freer that you're using the same amount of airflow, but the air is being compressed less. And we talked about this earlier. When you compress air less, let's say 14 psi versus 16 psi, it's not as hot. The air going into the intercooler is actually cooler. Or I'm sorry, the air coming out of the intercooler is cooler. So, anyways, that's
Okay.
and so obviously they're larger, so they cool much better. So that's where you get that compounding effect. You don't necessarily need to get tuned to run a larger intercooler, but again, without a tune, you're really not reaping the benefits of that bolt-on.
Cool. Chris Meck has a question here. Is for the LNF. Martin and Brian are already aware of my build and the tune. Overall, she's performing well. Launch it through 80 miles per hour is instantaneous. It seems the pedal is a bit weak or spongy beyond at the same time acceleration rate. I know we're going to revisit the tune, but thoughts that I should be maybe thinking of increasing my fuel rate.
So let me just make sure I heard this right. When you're cruising along, the bottom end is real strong, but when you're cruising along at 80, it feels weak. Is that correct? Hello?
He's probably responding.
Oh.
You guys am I on?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, hey Martin. Hey Brian.
Hey.
Yeah, so I mean from launch to 80 is like hang on to your ass. I mean it's incredible. If I'm running it at 70 or 80 and I punch it, right, and give it more, she'll run up to 120 easy, but I feel like it's not the same pedal rate, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you one question. Is this a stage 2 or stage 3 car?
This is the stage 2 that we did the tune
Okay.
on. Right.
So
yeah.
stock so you have the stock turbocharger.
Stock turbocharger, but the larger air volume with the P-Works intercooler and your tubes. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's
And
holding you back?
Yeah.
What's holding you back at this point is going to be your top end airflow. So this is a good time to talk about the above the curve gain. So this is something that is very rarely spoken about because everybody gets fixated on peak horsepower. Hey, RPM Motorsports, if I get your stage 3 package, what's my peak horsepower going to be? That's a good question. That's a good first question. But where the upgraded turbochargers, and it doesn't matter whether it's ours or anyone else's that's on the market, the upgraded turbos where they really kind of shine is provided they're built correctly. Normally, you have a dyno chart that's going to go up. It's going to make peak horsepower at a certain RPM, but then with the stock KO4s, you start that downslope. So the above the curve number is basically from where it peaks to where it redlines. So in a normal stock KO4, like the one that you're running, it's going to go up, it's going to peak, but then as you're high in the higher RPM band. So if you're cruising along at 80 miles an hour, you're probably at 3,000 RPMs already. And your engine is basically one big air pump. So it's moving an amount of airflow at 80 miles an hour that is maxing out the stock compressor wheel's capabilities. And so that's where the upgraded turbos come into play. Our upgraded turbo has a larger inducer, larger exducer, and basically if you look at a dyno chart from a car that had our stage 2 and then went into our stage 3. The biggest difference is not that peak horsepower number. That is larger, but it's not the biggest number. It's the above the curve gains. So we did a test a few years ago. We had a gentleman come in, 07 GXP. We were able to dyno his car stock. We were able to dyno his car on a stage 2. And then he came back like 6 weeks later, and he got the intercooler and our upgraded turbo, and we dynoed it again. So this gave us a great case study for the differences. And again, this is not only true for our kits. This is true for anybody who kind of goes through this process with even other companies' products. His peak horsepower on stage 2 was 322 wheel horsepower. His peak horsepower on stage 3 was 355 wheel horsepower. So, there was a decent jump there. But where we were really blown away is the above the curve number. So on that same vehicle at 5,500 RPMs, there was an 80 horsepower difference. So again, that's the above the curve gain. So, your dyno chart becomes a lot more, it'll go up at peak and it kind of plateaus until you hit red line, as opposed to going up, peaking, and then falling right back off. A stage 2 car that we dynoed here recently, it made 318 peak horsepower at 3,800 RPMs. But when we hit the rev limiter at 6,500 RPMs, that same car was only making 240 wheel horsepower. So it's, to go back to Chris's car, it's really, you need to have a bigger turbocharger, a larger turbocharger, not so much so that you can get more peak gains, but so that you can carry your horsepower longer into the RPM bands. And what you're going to see you're going to see that difference accelerating from 80 to 120 miles an hour. That's where you're going to see those above the curve gains really benefit you.
Cool. We have a question from some people from Sweden are connected right now. Kelly Mickelson and Maria Larsson in north of Sweden. We have an Opel GT 2007, all stock and just about 22,000 miles. It's an LNF, of course. We have heard a lot of positive things about the basic tune, and we're interested in testing this. I guess the stage 1 is all we can do, since we can't change CAT or obvious intake modifications due to emission rules. Can you explain how the process of tuning is done and what we need to order
Absolutely.
from RPM
So
to get it done?
That's a great question, and I'm glad that it's an international question, because it allows me to kind of address our tuning options here. So, to get your car tuned, you basically have to have, the tuner has to have the ability to plug in and read and write to the car's ECM, and in most cases, be able to data log the vehicle and get real live feedback from the car and how is it taking to the new calibration, so that you can take that and, all your data logging every data log you do gets rolled back into a revision until the car is running absolutely perfect. That's how it's supposed to be in a perfect world. But in order to do that, you either have to drive your car to a tuner that knows how to tune your car. That's probably the easiest way. We all know that the LNF, in direct injection motors, they're a rarity. Tuners that actually know how to tune direct injection they're becoming more and more popular, but it's only because tuners are having to learn, because port injection is going away. So the other option is, for instance, we have these V-tuners that we call, and they're basically, let's just say it's a laptop and an HP Tuners interface. The laptops are pre-programmed so that when they hit the internet, they call home, say, hey, I'm online. These rigs are not inexpensive to build, but we've invested tens of thousands of dollars as a company in building out, at this point we've built like 36 of them, but unfortunately some people feel entitled and they decide they want to keep them. We work on the honor system here at RPM, for better or for worse, but people do keep them over time. And so we're really down to about 16 at this point, if I remember the last number from Matt. But we basically send that out, and that's what really allows us to work our magic. Because I said from day one, we're not going to do can tunes. We're just not going to do them. I get people who call us all the time. Can I send you my ECM and can you tune it? No, I will not do that. There are companies that will do that, but I won't do that. And it's because every one of these vehicles is different. Every vehicle requires its own specific tune. And that is because your grade of fuel is different. You're at a different altitude. Solstice number A has 22,000 miles on it. Solstice B, with the exact same modifications, has 85,000 miles on it. Solstice C, with the exact same modifications on it, has 185,000 miles on it. All of these motors are going to have different compression ratios if we were to do a compression and leak down test. So every one of these vehicles, and then right down to the carbon buildup that's on the valves, that affects the tune. So we will only live tune a vehicle. So that's how we deliver our tune. That's our tune delivery system here at RPM. And it's worked for us. It's allowed us to, deliver a product that's consistent and that's absolutely 100% vehicle specific. And then the challenge is to circle back around to this is we do have a pretty large international clientele, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Spain. The challenge with international is it takes 10 days to ship a V-tuner there. There's a time difference. I've tuned cars at 2 o'clock in the morning in Arizona internationally. I'll do it. But our real challenge is that the V-tuner is 10 days there. It's 10 days back. We've got that one rig that's now tied up for a minimum of 20 days. And in 20 days, we can have that rig at 4 other customers, houses. So for the international clientele, what I prefer to do is we do one of two things. Either we're going to sell you an HP Tuners interface outright. They're $299. You're going to get it in the mail. We're going to give you some software that allows us to remotely access your laptop for the tuning process. And then from there, we tune your car live just as if we had sent you a V-tuner, but now you own the equipment. This is a great option because now you have your own interface and it gives you what we like to call long-term support. With our customers that use our V-tuning systems, it's the least expensive way to get tuned. It's the best way to get tuned. The downfall is one, other than there's always a slight wait for the V-tuners. But once that tuner leaves your possession, the tune that's on your car is on your car. So if your car is 1 year tune, 2 year tune, 3 year tune, everything changes. Carbon buildup changes. Your fuel pump gets a little bit weaker, yada, yada, yada. So it's not a bad idea to have your own HP Tuners interface. I have customers that we tuned 5 years ago that have their own interfaces, and they still randomly send me data logs. Hey, Martin, hope you remember me. Here's a data log I ran last night. Let me know your thoughts on it. Hey, your math scale has changed slightly. I'm not sure why, but this is the last file I had for you. Upload this to the car. They upload it to the car, comes back to me, straightened out. And I usually get cars running much better. So for our international customers, that's option one, is to purchase your interface outright. Option two is you purchase your interface outright for the $299, and when you're finished with it, and if you ship it back to me here at RPM, we refund you 50%. So it kind of becomes, instead of an outright purchase, it kind of a rental, if you will. So we've got a couple of interfaces. So
that's customer service right there.
Well,
yeah,
it's like any industry, customer service has to be first and foremost. I mean, like I said, you can call our Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. You can call our number. You're either going to get somebody on the phone immediately, or you're going to get a phone call back within an hour.
I personally think you should charge a deposit, but we have a question here. Please,
we thought about the deposit, but the challenge with the deposit is a lot of individuals these days, they want to play with their cars and they don't mind paying. But if you're going to charge, let's say, $150 or $300 deposit on a V-tuner laptop system, that's money that they have to put out on the front end, and we understand that, which is why we really haven't made the hard change. And we we still operate on the honor system, and we still continue to send these V-tuners out, and we still continue to lose probably 2 or 3 a year, and we have to eat that and absorb that cost as a business.
Well, too bad. There's a question. Please clarify, why are you surprised that original O2 sensors are in a car? What wears out, and what is a normal replacement interval? You probably missed this. We talked about this earlier, but can you quickly talk about that?
I mean, all these parts on the vehicle are wearable. Sensors are what feed the data back to the ECM, so the ECM can do its job. So things like MAP sensors, MAF sensors, O2 sensors, those are sensors that, they control basically airflow versus fueling. So those are definitely sensors that you should, if you've got a car with 100,000 miles on it and a little bit of extra time and money, it's not a bad idea to swap those out. Most of the time with a MAF sensor, you can pull it and clean it. MAP sensors, obviously, don't try and clean those. Normally I would say if you're going to change out the MAP sensors, you should just upgrade to the 3 bars and get a tune. But right now, just so you know, just so the world knows, the 3-bar MAP sensors from Bosch are actually on not only national but international back order as well. GM ran out of stock about 2.5 months ago, and they placed an order with Bosch, and obviously it takes a while for Bosch to actually build these sensors and get them back into the hands of GM. So pretty much all the vendors, to my knowledge, unless they've got some sitting on a shelf somewhere, we don't, but they are on national back order. So that's just a little tidbit there. I'm being told that they're not going to be back into stock until like July or August of this year. That's what I'm being told. But and then obviously your O2 sensors. O2 sensors, definitely go down to the auto parts store, go to your local dealership, get on Rock Auto, upstream, downstream. With this, they're different sensors for the 2.4 versus the 2.0. But you'll find that when you replace your O2 sensors, let's say they're 85,000, 100,000 mile, 130,000 miles on the car, you're going to find that your car is going to idle smoother. It's going to run smoother. Your fuel economy is going to increase. So anyways, that's kind of the long answer.
Yep. Well, we have about half an hour left for today's session, unless people want to stay longer. But do you want to talk a little bit about LNF performance upgrades?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously the LNF was a great motor. It's in our opinion, it's the strongest 2-liter motor that GM produced. Unfortunately, the motors since then have gotten weaker. I wish that they would have used the LNF in the ATS and the Camaros, because then we'd be getting 400 plus horsepower out of those cars instead of the 340, 350 that we're seeing today on a tuned and bolted 2-liter LTG. But the LNF is a great platform. It's capable of making 400 horsepower without building the engine. People say, well, what about mileage? My car has 185,000 miles on it. Well, again, real world case study. We have a gentleman here in Arizona who brought us his car with 187,000 miles on it. We did a stage 3 on it. He drives something like 110 miles a day round trip to go to work. So he's up to, since we did his stage 3, he prefers that we are the only ones that touch his car. And so he brings it to us for oil changes and routine maintenance. And he's up to like 230,000 miles right now. So he's got about 50,000 miles on the stage 3. No issues. Excuse me. Excuse me. So stage 3. So these motors can be very, very reliable. People talk about how do you detonate a motor? How do you throw a rod through the side of the engine? Well, was it my tune that did it? Well, the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of bolt-on performance parts that are out there for the vehicles. You need to find a vendor who is going to talk you through from start to finish, not just, yes, I have this EFR 6758 available for your car. It's this much money and I can have it shipped out on Friday. What do you say? We need to have the conversation. I've got this 6758 EFR turbo, but in order for you to use it safely and to its maximum potential, you're going to need this, 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 and this. So make sure that you're, you know, we've developed like our stage 2 and stage 3 kits. Don't have to build the motor. They're pretty standard. They're ultra reliable. Every tune, you know, you get, our promise is that the car is actually going to be healthier when we're done with it than it is when we get it. And when you start getting into things like stage 4 and stage 4 plus cars, which is, you know, you're doing some custom setups. We've got the new Garrett 2871R ball bearing turbo system that we do for our stage 4 kits. You have to talk and address about these supporting mods to make sure that that car is going to run safely and reliably. I would never take a stock LNF and really kind of get it to anything over like 430 at the crank. At that point, you're just asking for a rod to snap or crush a piston, something. So
let me stop you just quick. We have a raised hand here, and also Keely wanted to say thanks for a good answer, and I think it sounds reasonable to keep the interface. So to sum it up, we need to buy an HP tuner's interface and the tune itself, 299 plus 299. The remote service is included then.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. So
okay.
When you buy a tune from us, as long as it says it's a tune and not a tune file on our website, it comes with the appropriate licensing. So you don't have to buy additional credits through HP tuners because we're including those in the cost of the tune.
Okay. And then now, Todd, you have your raised hand. You have a question?
I was wondering about the tune on just a stock 2.4 with no upgrades or anything. How much of a wake up will you get out of that?
Probably not enough to really feel it. We've done them in the past, and in all honesty, I haven't done just like let's just call it a stage 1 tune on a 2.4. I haven't done one in years, primarily because when I do have customers that call us and they spend whatever, I think it's $275 that we have that tune listed for, I usually call them up immediately or within a day, and I say, hey, let's talk about your car. I really think that you should take the $275. Let's throw a little bit, another, $125 in there, and let's send you those injectors and get you into the stage 2. And it's really because we can tune the car, we can unlock its potential, but you're still being held back by those stock fuel injectors. And I tell you, like I said, on a bone stock car, the 24-pound injectors, it doesn't take much to max those out. Now you're adding a cold air intake or possibly a high flow cat. You're maxing out those injectors even sooner. So, I mean, the cost difference.
Is the hold up on the backup on the injectors, or is it on the catalytic converter?
Well, the cat on the 2.4s is very restrictive, but we're still not moving enough airflow naturally aspirated for that to really become a super huge problem. I mean,
okay.
We've proven on the dyno that we've made more power with a high flow cat versus a stock cat, but the numbers were pretty small, like not enough to make the seat of the pants feel differently.
Okay.
It's really the injectors. The injectors really. We got to get fueling. We have to properly fuel the vehicle across the entire RPM band and the engine load band.
Okay. Gotcha. And also I had another question regarding last week when you guys were talking about the convertible top cleaners. I have a tan top on my Sky, and it's pretty, when I bought it, it was pretty heavily soiled, and trying to get that clean. Is there anything that you could use that, like a heavy cleaner, without damaging the top?
That would, I mean, honestly, that's not my forte. That would probably be a Mike Martin question, perhaps.
Okay.
What's the proper way to clean the convertible top? I hate to say it, but I don't think I can remember the last time I actually cleaned the top. I mean, my race car's got a hard top, and my Sky does have a soft top. But I don't think I've ever actually cleaned it other than power washing it down, which is probably a big no-no, I'm sure. But
I would recommend. I'd recommend just buying some black dye and just changing it to black and call it a day.
There you go. That's yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
That
Hey,
same
John.
thing here.
John, sure. Hey, John, what did you use on your top? Because it's always been in great shape.
I had my top replaced by convertibles only in Seattle, and they recommended Dawn dishwashing liquid in a pail of warm water and a soft sponge. They said
Okay.
just about anything and leave the top in perfect condition, and then go back with your 303 or rag top conditioner and condition it, and then put some kind of UV protectant on it.
And that's 10 horsepower addition, right?
Well, you know, if you remove the dirt, the air will flow a lot easier over the top of your car.
There you go. Weight reduction.
That's right.
Can you actually use, off-the-shelf fabric dye, or is that not a good idea?
I've never dyed the top of my car, so I don't know that for sure. Somebody else can chime in on that.
The Hearts fabric that GM uses on this does not take a dye very well. So unless you got it when it doesn't have any other sealants or a brand new top, it really, is really not going to absorb much dye at all.
All right. Well, cool. Let's go back to
You know,
performance
somebody's got a tan top
conversation.
on for sale.
Actually, I got a kind of a question about performance for Martin. Everyone's talking about with these stage 2 upgrades and things, you're changing the charge pipes. What's the biggest difference between a stage charge pipe that you sell compared to the stock ones?
good question. And because we're in the shop, I might be able to show you. Dion, do we have a stock charge pipe running around? We typically scrap them as soon as they come off the cars, but we may have one that hasn't gone to the scrap yard just yet. I am looking here. Stand by.
I keep putting him on the spot.
If he doesn't have one, I think I got a set sitting out in the back somewhere.
It looks like when they made them, somebody just bent it over their knee. That crease that's in the bend there.
Well, as far as going back to the convertible top real quick while he's looking, 303 is the kind of the product that I always recommended.
Bring me the shorty as well.
I think I had the cleaner, but mine's black. So it really, I mean, it's probably dirty, but it's really hard to see how much it actually cleans it. So, so as far as the tan one, you know, that's interesting about the dish detergent, but obviously as soon as you do that, you have to protect it some way, because I'm sure it gets rid of any kind of protection once it's on there.
I use Never Wet as a protectant in my top.
So who was it that was fighting all the bees?
Brian.
Was Brian
So-
fighting these, or
Yeah,
was
hang on for a second. So you want to hold that. So real quick, this is a stock charge pipe. The one on the passenger, this is off the driver's side. The one on the passenger side is actually even worse than this. But you can see that it's got a big spot. And so what happens is GM, you know, they're a business like any business, and they need to control costs. So the way that these pipes were produced is they started out as a long, straight piece of aluminum, and a robotic armature came along, grabbed one, and wrapped it around a mold. And so it does the job. It flows the 22 to 24 pounds per minute of airflow that we're asking from it on a stock setup. When you start increasing airflow, you want to get rid of anything that's in the way of that airflow. So, you know, here's our upgraded charge pipe. Again, 100% mandrel bend. And so we get rid of those bends. That's why with all of our kits, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, the first thing on the list are the charge pipes. Other vendors feel differently about this. It's just the way we feel. So I guess to each is their own, as they say. But I will tell you that it does make a difference when you're driving, 30 pounds plus per minute of airflow.
So it's very similar to your exhaust pipe as well, because ours are actually pretty good, even stock. But some cars, they're pretty bent, and they squeeze certain parts of it, so you really lose that airflow.
Yeah. So I mean, again, you refer to as an engine as a big air pump. So air's got to come in, air's got to go out. The stock exhausts on these cars do flow well for even up to a stage 3 application. We really don't see any super big gains on changing out the exhaust until we get into a stage 4 type system. I usually tell my customers that changing out the exhaust is really, it's a sound thing. I want my car to sound differently, so that's why you change the exhaust. People who come to me and say, what exhaust do you sell so I can get more horsepower? I say, well, let's back that up. Don't take the money. If power is your goal here, put the money into an intercooler, turbocharger, something of that nature. Unless we're talking about, like I said, a stage 4 plus car and it's being built to make power, then, we start getting into even just things like the stock catalytic converters that bottleneck to 2.5 inch and then open up again. That's why we developed our race exhaust, our true race exhaust, because we use V-bands. The V-bands allow us to basically keep that full 3 inch from start to finish.
So speaking of big power, Lee is asking if your HP Tuner's interface and the tune service is good for LS3 twin turbo setups too.
The answer is we tuned LS motors here in the past. It's not my forte. I do have a tuner on our payroll that is kind of like an on-call tuner that does a great job tuning LS motors. So I usually defer to him. So I'm a little weak in that area. I'm really a direct injection Ecotech tuner, not so much an LS tuner. And rightfully so, LS tuners will tell you the exact opposite. They're a great LS V8 port injection tuner, but when it comes to DI, they're just completely lost.
And then, is the better charge pipes also needed for a stage 1 tune? This is from Sweden again.
So the answer is a stage 1 tune is designed for a bone stock car. On a stage 1 tune, we're really only taking you to about 28 pounds per minute of airflow at max, especially if you still have the stock catalytic converter. I mean, like I said, a stage 1 tune is designed to, the stage 1 tune is really designed to wake the car up, disable torque management. We raise the boost from 16 PSI to about 21 PSI. And that's where we kind of leave it. Again, we talked about this earlier. Even with our tuning, we still kind of leave some of that learn down enabled because we're protecting your car. We don't want to, just because we can tune the car to make 32 pounds per minute of airflow on a stock turbo doesn't mean that we should, because the stock components are not, up to the job. They're not up to the task.
Does your tuning do anything with the automatic transmission, the shift, when it shift changes and stuff?
So there's the TCM has its own set of torque management in it that if you tune the engine and it's going to produce more torque, you have to tune the transmission to a certain extent because otherwise you bump into the torque management on the transmission. So with our standard tuning, we basically disable the torque management in the TCM, but we don't go in depth in changing shift points and pressures and things of that nature unless we're asked to, and we do charge $50 for that.
Okay. Speaking of charging, Matt is asking, when will the True Race be available for purchase?
It's available on the website now. We've sold a few of them already. They're out there. We have just been so busy lately, and though that we're actually building those to order. So we don't have any. We normally like to keep a small inventory here because we build everything ourselves in-house. It allows us to keep a smaller inventory because when I have 12 sets of charge pipes in inventory. When I get down to 3, we just build more. That's what we do here. But the True Race exhausts are being built to order right now, so they do run about 2 weeks out. And we like our True Race exhaust. We developed it originally for our Stage 4 track cars here in Arizona, because we use our track cars here to do a lot of R&T. And like with anything, it's that track technology that filters down to the products that we sell for the street cars. So the True Race exhaust, it's available on the site now. It gives you the option of 3 different rear sections, which is really cool. I think we're the only company that offers that hot swappability on the rear section. So basically you can purchase your street muffler system and you can purchase your race system without the mufflers. You're going to go to the autocross, you're going to go to the track, you basically loosen one bolt, remove the clamp on the V-band, and the rear section drops out. You pop your new section in, you're done in about 15 to 20 minutes. Go to the track, you come home, and you swap it back out. And when you go to work the next day, your car's a lot quieter, your neighbors don't hate you, and you're still getting the performance out of the car.
Or the neighbors can still hate you, but Now, 40 has a question. When will your coolant reservoir be released?
We released them about 2 weeks ago. We've already shipped a dozen of them, and we've got more in production and build right now. So they're available on the website. I think they're $119. So.
I got a.
So we have about 10 more minutes. Okay.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, we have 10 minutes, but real quick, we can talk about performance and stuff like that. And obviously, the faster your car goes, the more braking ability you have. So, about your Brembo kit, is that kind of a bolt-on, or do we have to change anything else with it?
It is 100% bolt-on. So, there are there's no secret to car parts. If you've got the time and the know-how, you can pretty much build anything you want to build yourself. But a lot of time what happens is, a lot of people just want to pick up the phone and they want to call a company that's been tried and proven and has a good track record, and they want to buy the parts from them. And that's what we do. And I completely lost my train of thought. We were talking about what again?
The
Brembo brakes, yes. So the Brembo kit is something that we basically acquire all the parts. We acquire the rotors, the brakes. We do we don't build the steel braided lines, but we have a company here local to us, a couple suites down, that builds our steel braided lines for us. They are phenomenal. Everyone talks about, I've got 6 piston calipers on my race car. I drive one of our other track cars in the back. It's a Stage 4 car that runs E85R, and it's got our 4-piston Brembo kit on it with the 12.5-inch rotors. And let me tell you something, it performs really, really well. The driver of that car, we do what's called Pro Auto Sports out here. It's an ASA type racing event, and it's basically 20 minutes of hardcore. You're at 5,000 RPMs for 20 minutes straight, and you are accelerating and braking as you go through the various corners and turns. And he's tracked that car on stock brakes. He's tracked it on stock brakes with upgraded pads, and then we swapped him over to the Brembo kit before we released our kit. And he's done. He's like, this is the kit, this is the shit. I don't need 6-piston calipers. And he's out there embarrassing people with, $110,000 Porsches and Corvettes. He's just embarrassing them on the track with his Solstice. So, but you're right. If you go fast, you need to be able to stop just as fast. And the Brembo kit definitely does that for you. And it's pretty reasonably priced for what you get. So, it is 100.
I'm sorry.
And it is 100% bolt-in. So there are some options in there. Are you going to use aftermarket wheels with a larger offset? Are you going to use stock wheels with a more narrow offset? Then we need to different studs and small wheel spacers, that kind of thing. But that's all available to you, so that when you get it in the mail, you can go out on a Saturday morning in your garage and put them in.
Now, Matt has a question. Does a true race come with a downpipe?
It does. So again, that's kind of what makes that particular exhaust system radically different from what everyone else is doing. Everyone else is creating an exhaust that bolts up to either an aftermarket or stock catalytic converter, which is what most people need. But the stock catalytic converter and the aftermarket cats or downpipes on the market, including ours, they bottleneck. They transition from 3-inch down to 2.5, and then it's back out to whatever your exhaust is, 2.5 or 3-inch. So that's where your bottleneck is. Our True Race exhaust comes with a downpipe by default, so it bolts up to the KO4 turbocharger, and it goes down to a V-band. And the V-band is what allows us to keep that full 3-inch all the way back. Plus, it gives the customer the availability of, it doesn't take hours to swap components out. It takes minutes to swap components out. So our True Race exhaust basically consists of the downpipe, what we call the mid-pipe. The mid-pipe is either a straight pipe with no cat, or it's got a MagnaFlow cat welded into it. So we kind of relocate the cat on that particular kit. And then it goes back to the rear section. So right about where your rear differential is, there's another V-band, and then it goes to the rear section. So we have 3 rear sections available. We've got a full race, which is no mufflers, no cats. It's literally 3-inch V-band into a dual 2.5 out to the tips. We got the next one, which is a little bit quieter, but not by much, with resonators in there. And then we've got the street version, which we use MagnaFlow mufflers here. And so we basically do a full 3-inch in to a dual 2.5-inch out using the MagnaFlow can.
Nice. Lee has a question. Brembo versus Rotora brakes. Thoughts on comparison?
Honestly, we're not a Rotora dealer, so I can't speak to which kit is better. And honestly, I've never driven a car with those brakes on it, so I can't honestly say that they're better or worse, the same. They've got a great track record, and so I would have to assume that they're pretty darn good brakes. So it really just kind of comes down to, Brembo made in Italy versus Rotora. I don't know where they're built or how they're built. So I know that GM kind of exclusively uses Brembo on a lot of their performance vehicles. And so that was kind of why we focused on going with Brembo versus another brand, like let's say Willwood or something, because just one, availability of the parts, and two, history, who's using what and in the masses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Well, we have about 4 minutes left, and just wanted to get some closing comments. And thank you for coming here, and thank you, Mike, for organizing this. Like, this was his idea, and so bringing everybody together is just awesome. And I'm just providing this moderation service and Zoom interaction. But thank you guys, Mike and Martin.
I want to thank Martin for being here as well. I know not a whole lot about our cars, but a lot more than when I first bought it. And today's session, I learned even more, and that's the whole key. I mean, our cars are actually very easy to work on. Believe it or not, before I bought my Sky, I never worked on it. I never did brakes. I never did anything. I always sent it out to somebody. But this car is, one, it's easy to work on, and two, it's actually kind of fun to work on as well. So don't be afraid to do stuff yourself. Todd, if you get to your stage, 2, changing the injectors is really not that difficult. I've done it twice now. The first time was a little crazy because I didn't know what I was doing. The second time, I literally changed it in about 20 minutes. So it's very easy to do. So definitely go stage 2 instead of stage 1 if that's what you're looking for Martin. But again, Martin, I really appreciate you being here. I know we're taking some time off on your Saturday, and you had some great information.
Absolutely. I appreciate being here. I appreciate seeing everyone that came out for this today. Like I said, anytime you have a question, by all means, reach out to us, reach out to your other vendors that are in the community. They're all great people. I know all of them personally. They are, Dave over at Performance Auto Works, Dave Michael over at DDM, Bill Hahn. A lot of them are very, very knowledgeable individuals, probably more so than myself. And so they just reach out to your vendors, ask questions. It's okay to ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. I assure you, that's how you learn. And I am always available in most cases.
Even Christmas.
I will tell you that, I will tell you that recently, I think most of the community knows that I was diagnosed with a heart condition. And so I have actually been kind of stepping back from RPM a little bit, to the sense of I'm kind of delegating and letting the teams kind of run their things. And there have been some growing pains here and there, but it allows them to learn from their mistakes and become better business people themselves. But I'm always available through email to answer questions. I may not be available to jump on a phone call, at the drop of a dime, but I'm usually available within 24 hours to somebody, anyone that needs or has a question. And if I can't answer the question, I'll put you in contact with someone who can.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have you guys as vendors for our platform, and it's a very small platform, and it's in decay and it's dying off, and you guys are still strong and going at it. And DDM and Paul and you and everybody who's in the performance part of the platform, we're just really
Absolutely.
lucky to have you.
Like I said, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. We're going to continue to not only service the platform, but continue to build parts that are phased out by GM for the platform. So that's kind of a business model shift, if you will. We're still always going to do the performance stuff, but we're getting into manufacturing more of the OE stuff that needs to be, around for these vehicles. So yeah.
Matt is asking if you're hiring.
Believe it or not, I am. We are so busy here at RPM. The shop is just stacked with cars. And I tell you, one car leaves, 2 cars come in, 2 cars leave, 3 cars come in. This is just what we can see on the inside of the shop. We have another 1,500 square foot behind the roll-up door that's got cars out back that are waiting to have something done to them. We have customers that are shipping us their cars from all over the country to have work done on them. So we're fortunate in that sense. But yeah, the answer is yes. We're trying to hire some more staff. The COVID-19 pandemic that's currently going on, which has kind of brought us all together here today, and in fact is taken a small toll on RPM. We've lost a few employees because they were forced to stay home because now the kids are out of school full time. And so we need to hire to replace them. And then obviously just additional hands. I mean, we need mechanics and we need fabricators.
Awesome. Well, I think for the next session, we will continue to talk more performance upgrades, suspension and brakes and, everything else that we will go through. But thank you so much for today's session. Was amazing. I had so much fun. And Mike, closing words, please.
Again, I just want to thank Martin for being here and everybody else for being here. I think, once Sal gets the recordings over to me, I'm going to go ahead, and I did create in case anybody doesn't know, I did create a separate YouTube channel just for these sessions. So if you can't make it here, you can always go back and you can look at there. But obviously we want more people involved so we get more questions and so on. So I'm thinking, we're going to try this once a week or once every 2 weeks, whatever it is. We don't have a set schedule, but if you have any kind of questions or if you have any kind of ideas of what you want to see on these sessions, please let us know, and we'll try to do that for you. But again, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I'm not sure how many people were online. I didn't really check, but I appreciate it, and I really appreciate Sal, making this available to us through the University of Minnesota. And again, I know everyone's talking about security. I don't have a problem with it. I've used it many times with business stuff. So. I think we're going to probably stick with Zoom until somebody raises their hand and said, hey, somebody stole all my credit cards kind of thing. But anyway, again, I appreciate that. Everybody else that's been here. Again, I can't thank you guys enough. And this is it's kind of funny real quick. I know we're running out of time, but when I hear about other car clubs, the Corvette, the Miata and stuff, they're like, my God, I belong to those. If they tried anything like this, it wouldn't be nearly as smooth and nearly as friendly. So I don't know, maybe I don't want to buy a Corvette just because the people aren't quite as nice as our Kappa community.
Just buy the engine.
What's that?
Just buy the engine, not the whole car.
Just drop the engine. That's both words. But, anyway, that's all I have to say. If anybody has anything else, please do. Otherwise, I think we're just going to wrap.
I want to personally thank Martin too for coming by today. He's always been a big help for us, and even outside the Kappa community. My fiance was in Arizona once, had a brake problem. He was there to help her out with her Hyundai. So, yeah, he's really a great resource, a great guy. I've sat down, broke bread with him. Can't thank him enough for all he's done for us.
Thank you.
And Martin, I think we're doing our tune today, so just let me know when you're going to be available.
Right after this.
Oh, perfect.
All right.
All right.
All right, guys. Until next time.
All right,
Hey, guys. Take care.
Bye, everybody.